Hi guys. Well, here we are again. This is week 4. My thing is in the wrong spot. Um, so I don't really know if this is helping very many of you guys, but these days I'm feeling like a data collector, so maybe it does me some good just to talk over these things. I sure wish we were all together. Oh man, what an exciting time this unit was, and what it covered. So really bums me out. But anyways, here goes the last little part of period 8. So in this unit, one of the learning objectives is the causes and effect of continuing policy debates about the role of the federal government. This is something we're still seeing today. You turn on the news tonight and you'll see President Trump say the governor should do this, the state should do this, and then you wait a few minutes, you hear the governor say the federal government should be doing this, right? So because we have this federal form of government, it does create some conflicts during certain times, especially when things are very tense or there's problems. Who is supposed to be doing what? And then also changes to immigration. So in 65, there's going to be an Immigration Act. I put this little image right on up here. Federal grants to state and local governments kind of over time just kind of shows the increase to them. Of course, and our Congress has been passing $500 billion aid packages, not necessarily going to states, but some of that money definitely is, and we're going to see more to come from all that I've been hearing. So I just thought it was kind of a cool visual for you on this slide. All right, so let's just start with the Immigration Act. So Immigration Act of 65 is going to ease restrictions on immigration by ending the quota system. So if you recall back to 1921 and 1924, those were the previous big landmark immigration laws. And the Oh my gosh, I hear Gronkowski crying. Hold on, I gotta let him in. All right, we'll probably have to pause again, and I'm gonna probably have to let him out. He seems to want in and out, in and out. Okay, anyways, so what we were saying is 21, 24 big immigration quotas were passed. And here we've got a really cool picture, I think. It's Lyndon Johnson. He's signing this. He is at Ellis Island, so this is the New York Harbor in the back. I hope one day all of you can go visit New York City, go get on the ferry, go out to Statue of Liberty, and go out to Ellis Island. It's just incredible. This is his wife, Lady Bird Johnson, right here. This is Humphrey, vice president, I believe, at the time, or maybe he was a New York senator. But anyways, important guy. And then here, over here, we have Ted Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy. So this is in 65. The Kennedys are not a part of the administration at this time, but they are both still there. And actually, Bobby Kennedy, I believe, would have been a New York senator by this time. And then his younger brother here. So it's really showing that, hey, the Kennedys were behind this. And of course, they are a family of immigrants. I believe their grandfather had immigrated from Ireland. And so, this is just such a cool image. There's just a lot in it. I'm kind of wondering what this guy's doing. Maybe he's Secret Service. Who knows? All right. And then, click. Why won't this click to the next slide? Let me click. Oh, there we go. Make sure. Okay. And then you can see how the immigration laws change the mix of immigrants coming to our country because, again, the quotas were gone. So 65 is going to be, right in here, and it's going to change. And this is going to allow for way more immigration than had previously happened. Well, not quite, right? I mean, look at this peak right here, the peak that we had talked about in our class in the 80s and 1880s, 1890s. But it had dropped significantly since then with Chinese Exclusion Act and other tightening of immigration, especially in the 20s right here. And then, of course, during the Depression, All right, so take a look at that. I think it's kind of a cool graphic. Okay, so a little bit on LBJ. He's quite an interesting character. He had been the Senate Majority Leader, and then he was tapped to be the Vice President since he was from, one big reason, he was from Texas, and Kennedys were from Massachusetts, and they needed the Southern, help with the Southern push and Southern Democrats. One thing I think is so interesting to have about him is how he began his career as a school teacher. And, it's very interesting being a teacher. Obviously I get 150 kids and their families each year. I know, this firsthand, the impact that students make on all the teachers, on me, definitely. It really is an incredible job. And him beginning as a school teacher, he was out in rural Texas, very poor area of West Texas. And, when he went into Congress, he carried these stories of these children and these families with him. And when he was in Congress, he was there at the time during the New Deal administration, and FDR was just such a big model for him. So when he became president, he was like, all right, I'm going to do this. We're going to do a New Deal type program. I'm going to call it the Great Society. And he did. And that's what your primary source work is on this week. I only gave you one option because I wanted you guys to all look at that because there's still ramifications for today. So I thought, you know what, let's just have you all do it. Anyways, the Great Society, while some people might say it was successful, some might say it was not successful, it bottom line was hindered by the Vietnam War. The federal government only had so much money to spend, and a lot of that was going to the war. But he did establish many of the programs that still exist today. So when you get to the primary source activity, you'll see some of those. All right. And I thought this was a really cool picture. This is LBJ right here, and he is shaking the hand of Franklin Roosevelt, and you can see at the top he signed it. So, just kind of this interesting kind of dynamic, I think, in the middle is the governor of Texas. And then just also, hey, LBJ, I think this just shows how much the president has to deal with. So foreign policy, like in the case of a war, foreign war, and then, or, concept like communism spreading, containment, and also domestic policy, things you want to get done, things that need to get done at home. So while the 1950s looked all hunky-dory, there is quite a bunch of literature out there about what's called the persistence of poverty, and how, in the 50s, many communities did not have electricity, did not have running water, things like that we just, take for granted today. But while much of America had those things, a large segment did not. So keep that in mind, this Great Society. I think that's a really great reminder of all the issues the president has. There's not just one, and that's what makes the presidency so hard, and also what makes his cabinet, his advisors, so important, because he can't be, the most knowledgeable person on all these things. There's just no way. There is no way. Okay. Uh, and then I just thought this is a really cool picture. This is LBJ with his class. And I pulled this off of the the LBJ Library, which is in Texas. And you can see the kiddos in his class. These are the kids that inspired him. I just think it's just cool. These kids, they had no idea, the impact they were having on this man, and that's like all of you guys. So, anyways, we've got some new programs, down there at the bottom. You can see Medicare, Medicaid, Head Start, Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is a cabinet level position, and then there are many more. So look at that primary source activity. I think it has a lot of relevance to today, even though now we are 60 years later. Crazy town. Okay, I put this on here. This is kind of an interesting thing. This phrase I took from a College Board, kind of a deal spiel. And it is kind of an interesting thing. But there's a lot of myth revolving around the Southern strategy. So I put this on here as well. It's about 11 minutes. I would take a look at it if you would like, if you're more interested in it. You can see here on these electoral maps right here, the flip, right? And I'm not talking about all of this area here. I'm talking about the South, and how and why does the South flip. And there's a little bit of myth, this looks really so much like it just flips, like boom, like a light switch. But there's a little myth surrounding it as well. It's not quite like that. This is just one way of measuring that, the Electoral College. But the idea of the Voting Rights Act that was passed, the support Democrats had for civil rights movement. And so just, take a look at it if you're interested in learning more about it than what's in your book. I recommend this video. I know it's a little bit longer, but he breaks it down really nicely. All right, I think I'm going to keep going on to topic 813. So this had to do with the environment. So some of my APES kids, you kind of know a little bit about this. And then religious movements, not going to get into that a whole lot here, just kind of focus on the environment. So Nixon, as we move into his presidency, you guys, he is such an interesting guy. I wish we could talk about him in class. And one thing about him is he really liked to be liked. And at this time, the environmental movement was taking off with this woman, Rachel Carson. Her book on called Silent Spring. This is a Jeopardy question all the time, you guys. And you know what? Nixon saw this as an opportunity. I don't know that he was a huge environmentalist, but he saw this as an opportunity to get people who wanted something, you know, just kind of like do good. And what's wrong with having clean air, you know, things like that. Of course, some people would see this as, you know, hey, you're restricting cars, you're restricting business, how they can run business, et cetera, et cetera. But we see a huge impact on the environment with the Nixon administration, Endangered Species Act, all these different kinds of things. So kind of cool. You can read this little quote that I put up here for him. You can pause it and read that. All right, and then the last kind of thing has to do with Watergate. I'm going to try to squish this in the time I have. So I thought this was interesting, the trust in government. You can kind of see here, this little graph I got here. And oh boy, so before we kind of get to the Watergate deal, there is this term called the silent majority. And, you know, this is where Nixon, remember, he's running in 68. And this is, you know, time of total chaos. You've got MLK has been assassinated a few years before, JFK, of course, a few years before 63. But now you've got Malcolm X is assassinated. You've got Bobby Kennedy is assassinated. Martin Luther King is assassinated around this time. I mean, this is just crazy town, right? And you've got all the hippies, you've got Woodstock. I mean, you've got this counterculture movement, anti-war movement. And so what does Nixon do? He uses this term, and you can see in this is part of his speech. Tonight, to you, the great silent majority of my fellow Americans, I ask for your support. So basically, he's talking to all the people who are just sitting around being quiet, you know, who aren't in the streets, aren't protesting, aren't making problems, blah 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 blah. Hey, I need you to come out and vote. And let's make this more normal. Like, let's try to fix these times. I put this little part of his campaign speech so you could see exactly what he had to say. It's short. I would click on it, listen to him, hear his voice. I think that's cool. All right, and then, you know, Watergate. Boy, I wish we were in the classroom for this. So definitely take a look at this little video. I always show this in the class. It's only about 5 minutes, but it breaks it down, all the different parts to it. I know it's confusing. Remember, the Watergate was the hotel that the Democratic National Committee was staying in, and it got bugged. So they wiretapped the phones illegally. And it wasn't so much that they did that, it was that they covered it up. And Nixon knew about the cover up. He got the FBI to work on that. And then he recorded himself in his own office. Originally, he did that for posterity so he could write his autobiography. And boy, that came back to bite him in the butt. So this really affected how people trusted the presidency. Ford becomes president. He is never going to be elected. Another great trivia question. But he steps in. He had been replaced. Spiro Agnew, who is the vice president, who was also totally corrupt. And so it's just such a crazy story. So Spiro Agnew, once he resigned, was given a sweetheart handshake of a deal. He resigned, and Nixon knew he was in big trouble. Because I heard this quote he gave where he said, as long as Agnew's around, they won't try to impeach me because no one wants Agnew to be the president. So I'm paraphrasing there. But once Agnew was gone, made a sweetheart deal, that created more problems for Nixon. Definitely, this is a great source as well for a little bit more information. I wish we were in the classroom. I've got these, good job, Gronk. I've got these newspapers all around my room about this from Miss Lintry's friend who had saved those copies for me. So bummer. All right, you guys, that's the last slide. I've just got like a second left, so I'm going to say goodbye to you for this week. We got it all onto one. I went really fast, but I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of these things. Feel free, if you want to talk about it a little, you can text me on Remind, send me notes on Google Classroom, email me. I sure do miss you guys. I hope you're all doing well. Thanks for still doing really great quality work and keeping up with your work and your due dates and all that jazz. And, you know, here's to next week. I will talk to you guys all later.